In this video, I'll be covering the tutorial 1 in chapter 5, beginning on page 5-29. The method that the tutorial uses to complete this exercise is slightly different from the previous methods that we've used. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the tutorial to kind of just show you a different way of doing it. Now, typically we start always off with a sketch. But for this particular tutorial, it's having you create the sketches from within the extrude command, and that's a little bit different. So I've already started my new object file, and now I need to go ahead and get into the base feature. So I'm going to choose extrude, and then here on the placement tab, it needs to know where to place this. So the book tells us to pick the front plane, which is this one right here. And then it has a couple of other steps, but we can skip those steps because it just selects the plane that we need. Now I can click right here to go to sketch view, which might make it a little bit easier to sketch this object out. So that's what I'm going to do, and I am going to start with a circle. So we'll draw the circle, which has a radius of 8, so it'll have a diameter of 16. I can now come in here and draw the rest of my lines in, starting here, and I'll just come down, go over. But I'm going to skip going over for a second. I'm going to do my next line down. That way I can have these things lined up horizontally, and then just close this off. Now I can use the delete segment tool to get rid of this bottom portion of this. So we'll come up here to delete segment, and we'll select these two pieces to get rid of those. Now the only thing that I need to put in here is a height, which in this case is going to be 12. So I will come in here and put 12 and hit enter. Now that finishes my sketch. So as soon as I click OK, I'm still in the extrude command, and it's got a default distance in of 216 right now, but that's not the distance that I'm looking for. What I want to have is 8. So I'll type in 8 here, and we can see that I've got my feature that is coming out 8. And once I hit the checkbox, then I have my base feature. Now, they went and put the hole in the sketch, but I don't necessarily agree with doing it that way. Since we have a hole tool, I would prefer to just go ahead and use the hole command. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on hole, and I'm going to select this face, and then hit shift and select my axis if I can get to it here. It doesn't seem to want to let me select the axis, the default axis. So what I'm going to do is just escape out of this command, and then I'm going to come up here and click axis and just grab this circular surface and say OK. Anytime you have an axis, it makes it a lot easier to go ahead and place the hole. So we'll go back to the hole command, select this face to place the hole, hit control, select the axis. That automatically puts it on that axis. I do want this hole to go all the way through, and I need it to have a diameter of 4. So now I can hit my checkbox, and now I have my base feature. So the next step, it tells me to go back to the extrude command, and now this time under placement, instead of selecting an item, I'm going to go to define and use previous. Now what that does is that uses the previous plane that I had from the earlier operation. So now I've got a sketch on the back plane right here, and I actually want to use this bottom edge. It'll give me the option to draw a rectangle down here, but there's really nothing to snap to, and I really want to have something to snap to. So instead of just using the rectangle command, I'm going to go to the project option, and I'm going to grab that bottom line. That brings that bottom line into the active sketch. And now I can just draw the rest of this shape in. If I pan up a little bit. And there I have my shape. Now, everything should be there because I projected this line, so it's kind of locked. The only thing I should have to do is change my height to 6. Once I change my height to 6, let me spin back around here. As soon as I click on OK, it asks me for my extrusion distance, and in this case it is 14. So I click OK, and now I have my first two shapes created. And like I said, that's using a slightly different method than we've used before. We don't typically create the sketches from within the extrude command. The danger in doing that is if you make a mistake in the extrude command, then you have to redo the sketch every single time. The benefit to doing it that way is it doesn't have a whole bunch of sketches displayed over here in your browser, and it kind of cleans it up a little bit. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to create an offset work plane. And this is going to be offset 2 millimeters from the front face. So going to the section of the book on page 5-34 where it says creating the third feature on DTM1, DTM1 is actually the datum plane that we create. So what I need to do is come up here and click on plane, and then I'm going to select this face, and up here it's got all of my options to place this. Now I can click on this arrow right here to take it the other way, and I want my translation to be 2. Now in this case I'm going to want to go with a -2. I just want to make sure that it places the correct way, and this arrow shows which way the plane is actually facing. So this is going to be fine to have the arrow coming this way, and you see that it automatically removes the negative from that 2, but you may just want to orbit around just to make sure that that's actually placing in the correct location before you do anything else. So now I can go ahead and say OK to that. And the next step is creating the feature that we're actually going to be using to do that. So this feature is created first by going to extrude, and notice that it automatically puts my working area directly on that plane that I just created. Now, just like in the previous step, I am going to go to the project command, and I'm going to select this edge right here to project it back because I kind of need that line to get the rest of my sketch in place. And I'm just going to go to sketch view, that way I can draw this flat. So I'll start again by drawing my line. This one's going to come down, it goes over, comes back up, goes over. Now when it comes back down, I want to make sure that I get the 2 L's, showing that this is equal lengths between the two. And then I will come back over and make sure that I get that L, showing that it's equal lengths. And then I can come up and close this object off. Now, a couple of the tools we haven't really talked about before, you notice that it's got a lot of weak dimensions in here, but nothing is shaded and nothing is lined up. Well, this button right here will shade any closed loop, and you have to have it shaded before you can extrude. This button right here highlights the open ends, so we can see the red dots right here indicating that those ends are open. And this one right here would show any overlapping geometry. So if I drew another line over top of this line and I clicked highlight overlapping geometry, it would highlight that as being an open end. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to delete segment, and I'm going to delete these 2 small segments right there so that I can make sure that everything is lined up the way that it's supposed to be. It still has my axis. This is still locked into where it's supposed to be. Now all I have to do is really dimension this. So I'm just going to go to normal dimensioning, and I'm going to put in my 25 for this piece, and I want this to be 2 from that edge. I want this to be 2 from this edge. And again, it's just middle click to place the dimensions once you get going. So let me pan up so that I can begin dimensioning the rest of this. This segment right here is going to be 4, so it's going to change both of those to be 4. And the internal height on this is 21, so let me change that to 21. And now I have no open ends, I have a closed loop profile that I can work with, and I have no more weak dimensions. So after drawing that sketch, I can go ahead and click OK to finish the sketch, and I'm just going to kind of orbit around so that I can see what's going on. I know that I want my distance to be 10, so I'm going to click on here and change the distance to 10, but this is going the wrong way, so I can click on this button right here to change its direction and have it go back the other way. And once I have that in, I can click on the checkbox to create the feature. So now I've got pretty much the majority of the shape. I don't like to see a lot of different planes and axes and stuff like that when I'm working, because I think it kind of makes it a little bit more confusing. So this DTM1 that I created over here, I'm going to right click on and I'm going to go to hide. And same thing with the axis that I created, I'm going to click on hide on that as well, so that I've got everything in here that I need. Now the last little feature that we have here is the hole, and it has you creating a sketch for that hole, but there's a command called hole, so that's what I'm going to use to create any hole that we do in this software. I just think it makes more sense to do it that way. So let me go ahead and reposition my model a little bit, and I'm going to click on the hole command. Now for placement, I want it on this face. And now I do want a linear hole, so I'm going to click here to put in my reference edges. So we'll click on this edge, and then we will hold Control and click on the bottom edge, and that's going to give me my 2 dimensions plus my diameter. And I'm actually not going to use the dialog box to do the rest of this. I'm just going to use the dimensions out here. So we'll change this to 19. We will change this one here to 5. And my diameter is going to be 2. And now I can see the preview of that going the whole way through, but just to make sure, I am going to select this button right here so that it goes all the way through no matter what, and then I can hit the checkbox to create that hole. So for Chapter 5 Tutorial 1, the method that they used is a little bit different than the methods that we've used before, but the result that we get at the end is essentially the same. It's just a slightly different way of doing things. So at this point you can save your model. I called mine Chapter 5 Tutorial 1. Please make sure that you put your last name in that file name somewhere, and then that assignment is complete.